So which one is it? Which one are you? Because if you clicked on this video, I know you're not secure. We are constantly being bombarded with advice from friends, movies, social media about how to act in relationships. Don't be too needy, be independent, but not too independent. Don't ever be jealous. And every time I hear that, I'm like, thanks, don't be jealous. Yeah, let me just pull the jealousy switch out of my ass and turn it off. I didn't think of that, thank you. But really, you can try to not be jealous or, try to be okay with being vulnerable. But at the end of the day, you can't just constantly be faking it. You're not fooling anyone because you know who you are, the good and the bad. And to fix any of the bad issues, you have to really take a deep look at the root causes of those issues and ask yourself why you behave in the ways you behave in relationships, in friendships. And that is rooted in attachment. The word of the day. It's the way we emotionally connect or not connect with people. And you can go your whole life without ever realizing what your attachment style is, which is wild to me because it's truly the foundation, the bedrock of all of your relationships and friendships. It sets the tone for how you think, how you feel, how you communicate in relationships. When you learn about attachment styles, something right off the bat that you'll notice is repeated patterns. You'll look back at your relationships and realize it's the same behaviors that play out over and over again. You'll be able to recognize and take accountability for the disruptive patterns that you bring to relationships. Maybe that's ghosting people. Maybe that's constantly stressing of if someone's cheating on you. You will understand why you act the way you do. So today we're going to chit chat about the different attachment styles, mostly anxious and avoidant today, and I'll give you guys some question prompts to reflect on like I usually do. We'll get into how the different attachment styles can interact with each other, like what an anxious and an avoidant partner looks like together, and then we'll talk about what steps you can take to work towards a healthier attachment. And don't forget to subscribe if you are interested in holistic wellness. So if you're just that person that's ready to level up their mental health, their mindset, their bank account, and their physical fitness. And let's get into today's video. So there are 4 attachment styles: secure, anxious, avoidant, and then a 4th one called disorganized, which is a combination of anxious and avoidant into one person. And guys, we cannot talk about attachment without talking about our childhood, because like most things that's wrong with us, it often stems from things that happened in our childhood. And I do want to say that you can definitely develop disorganized or anxious or avoidant attachment styles because of traumas later on in life. But the most common thing that affects our attachment is our relationship with our parents during childhood. We subconsciously expect our partners to act the same way our parents did. How we bonded with our caregivers during childhood directly translates into how we naturally behave with every relationship in adulthood. And I said naturally behave. So yes, it is how we are hardwired to think, but that doesn't mean we can't reprogram and work towards healthy adult bonds. So let's start with secure. These are people that had stable childhoods and healthy relationships with their parents. Their caregivers always made sure they felt valued, safe, reassured, loved. When they were distressed as a child, even if it was about something like, aliens are gonna come attack us, if they were distressed, no matter what it was, their parents made sure that all of their feelings were validated and they were reassured that they were going to be safe. When they needed help, their parents did not have a "what now? What does this child want now?" response. And because of that, in adulthood, they feel really comfortable just asking for what they want. They know their self-worth because their parents made sure they felt valued. They're comfortable being themselves and being vulnerable and seeking support in others. And they're also comfortable being alone. They don't need to jump from relationship to relationship. They are good at being independent. So they're doing great, Can't relate. I'm trying to get like you, my boy. Moving on to anxious attachment. If you have an anxious attachment style, you probably had parents who were inconsistent or unpredictable. Like if you had parents who were going through a divorce and facing their own emotional struggles, so sometimes they showed up for you and were there for you, and sometimes they neglected you. Anxious attached people were often the children that needed to parent themselves, sometimes even take care of their parents. If you developed an anxious attachment, you probably were stressed during childhood childhood. You could not consistently rely on someone and you didn't feel unconditional love. You were not prioritized, and because of that, as adults, you've really internalized that and feel like you're not that valuable, you're not that important, your needs don't really matter. These children grow up without a strong sense of worth, they don't feel important, they don't feel good enough, and more so, they learn to prioritize other needs over their own. They're constantly scanning and over-analyzing other people to try to make themselves more likable. They often morph into different personalities depending on who they're with. They're often people pleasers who lack boundaries. They often try to be everyone's cup of tea, really reading into every situation, worrying if their partner's gonna be there for them, worrying if their partner's gonna cheat on them. They are the people in relationships that are like, where are you going? Who are you going with? What time are you coming home? If this is your attachment, you can probably relate to the feeling of being tempted to check your partner's phone, or being stressed when they don't respond with like the same number of exclamation marks that you texted with. And they also tend to be the ones who play games in relationships to test their partner's love and loyalty. They have a hard time trusting their partners because as children, they could not trust their parents. They tend to be over dramatic sometimes to get someone's attention because as children, they weren't given attention. They needed to show these huge demonstrations for someone to actually care for their needs. They get jealous and suspicious easily. They try to make their partners jealous. They get separation anxiety. They don't like it when their partners go to a party without them. Guys, first of all, I'm saying all of this from a place of, trust me, true relatability, okay? So this is not like a slant on anyone. We are all works in progress. If you're not one of these people, really try to put yourself in the shoes of someone who so desperately didn't have love, reassurance, trust, security as a child, and why they're always worried that someone's gonna leave them and someone's gonna break their trust, and that's why they feel a need to control everything. They often feel like they are not valuable or worthy of love, and so the people around them are going to leave them. This is the lens that they see the world in. They see everything as a possible threat, so they really cling on to their partners. And here are some question prompts to gauge if this could be you. Do you tend to really latch onto people, sometimes even only after a few dates, and often want to control their decisions? Are you often obsessively almost worried about if your partner is going to find someone prettier than you, funnier than you, what they're doing, if they're thinking of you? And when there's conflict in your relationships, how do you react? Do you often have a hard time sleeping on it and coming back to it with a clear mind? Or do you feel like an anxious need to just solve it immediately because you're so worried what the consequences might be if you don't? In a relationship, when there's conflict, an anxious attached person gets very triggered that their person could leave them. Their sense of security is shattered. They'll often be the one like calling their partner 10 times, blowing up their partner's phone to try to resolve the matter. And by the way, if you're not anxiously attached, listening to all of this thinking, dang, those people got issues, couldn't be me, we're gonna get to you now. Now let's talk about avoidance. Let's take that same scenario we just talked about. A couple gets into a fight. An avoidant person will withdraw from the conversation. They're in flight mode. They're like, yeah, we out. They're the first to walk out of the room. They're the first to silence their phones or block their partner. They shut down and avoid conflict. They oftentimes suppress their feelings or they avoid communicating those feelings with other people because they do not want to be vulnerable or emotionally entangled with another person. And what kind of childhood does this often come from? It often comes from childhoods where parents didn't provide a whole lot more than the basic, food and shelter. Parents who were strict or emotionally distant. Maybe they just weren't very sensitive or gentle with you. They may not have been very emotionally expressive and oftentimes expected you to just suck it up, get it together, and be tough and independent. Oftentimes, these are the same kids that try to then win their parents' approval through achievements like sports or straight A's, hoping that by winning accolades and awards, by doing better, being better, they can win over their parents' approval. But when it comes to emotional availability and success, that's not something they were taught or feel comfortable doing. And if this is you in adulthood, you've learned to be really independent and not rely on anyone. You have a hard time relying on people, opening up to people, and you have a I don't need anyone mentality. I remember growing up, as a kid and remember being praised for being a really independent child, very self-sufficient. But I've actually now learned that that comes from a place of feeling like I couldn't rely on anyone because so many people let me down. Like, thanks, you like my independence? It's the trauma. People let me down so much and didn't show up for me so much to the point where I learned to just handle everything on my own. So growing up, I didn't like asking people for favors. I didn't like relying on them for support or advice. I didn't like inviting them to a graduation or asking someone to give me a ride to the airport. And don't get it wrong, these are not people who don't like others. They are totally okay with being around other people. They just won't let other people in because being intimate and vulnerable, showing big signs of affection or receiving big signs of affection scares you. You're the type of person that has no problem going on Tinder, Bumble, meeting up with people, having fun. But then when things get serious, when you start developing feelings or the other person starts to really like you, you're like, got a blast. New phone, who dis? You don't have a lot of emotional availability. You like to keep your space and distance from people because you were never taught or encouraged to be emotional and affectionate and receive that safely as a child. And here are some question prompts you can reflect on for an avoidant attached person. Do you suddenly ghost people when you start developing feelings? And when conflict arises in your romantic relationships, do you tend to just back away and avoid confronting it? And remember, attachment styles can come from other places beyond your childhood. If you were bullied in school growing up, if you went to like a super strict military boarding school, if you experienced death of loved ones, all of those are experiences that can shape an avoidant person. So those are the most common ones, but there's actually a fourth, less common one called disorganized. So these are the people that swing back between anxious and avoidance. Aren't you just the best of both worlds? I'm laughing through this. I could go on and on about this one because it's actually the one that I identify the most with. So if you've been watching this video thinking like, this girl's talking a lot of shit about other people, it's because I am in all of it. So that's the tea. So these are often people who grew up in households that were frightening, to be frank. Love and affection could be given totally, but it could be quickly flipped to anger and violence. They crave that closeness and affection, but they're also scared and have like almost a knee-jerk reaction when they do get it because it was hot and cold. They know love to be on a very thin line and switch quickly to anger. If you're this attachment style, it probably feels really chaotic and confusing to the people who you're with. You want love, but then you avoid it. You're in a constant state of inner conflict and confusion. It almost feels like a touch and go, like scared to step situation. These are people that really distrust others. They feel like even if they get the love that they want, eventually their partner's gonna become violent or abandon them or cheat on them. It's like they're convinced that. They're hardwired to think that because that hot and cold love is what they experienced as a kid and what they're most familiar with. It has to end badly. They can't just receive unconditional love. What is that? So they are constantly waiting for the shoe to drop. And if it doesn't drop, that's when they self-sabotage, they create fights and chaos to make go badly. Why do they do that? Because that pattern is what they are most familiar with. We as people, everyone, we don't gravitate to what's the most healthy. We gravitate to what we know. We gravitate to what's comfortable and familiar. When things are going well for too long, they will self-sabotage to prove to themselves, see? Good things can't last. It is their core belief that they can't receive love without the rug being pulled out from underneath them. So when our partner is loving and healthy and communicative and, cares about you, and no one pulls the rug out, we're gonna pull that shit out ourselves. So that's me. Welcome to the channel. We're doing great over here. And a couple question prompts to reflect on if you think this might be you. Do you seek either extreme closeness and like latching onto people or extreme distance and cutting people off with like not a lot of in between? Are your relationships often unpredictable, chaotic, or have intense patterns and cycles? And here's the attachment breakdown of the general population. 50% of the population is secure. 25% of the population is avoidant. 20% of the population is anxious. And 5% are anxious avoidant, both, aka disorganized. And in a very general sense, women tend to score higher with anxiety and men tend to score higher with avoidance. If you know your attachment style, there is a good chance that your partner will not be secure. So it's important to know how your attachment style relates to other attachment styles and how that works out in relationships. If both partners have an anxious attachment style, the relationship is often sustained by a mutual fear and a mutual need for the other person. To avoidance might actually look like a healthy relationship sometimes because both people are independent, both people don't like need or rely on each other, but that can be the problem. And it'll be really hard for them to get close to each other because they're both like swerving intimacy. And lastly, if one partner is anxious and one partner is avoidant, that's a heck of a match. The avoidant person will see the anxious person as too dependent, too needy, too clingy, and that scares the avoidant person. And the anxious person is over here feeling like their partner is too distant, their partner doesn't open up to them the way they do. So the anxious person is chasing the intimacy and the affection while the avoidant is literally running from it. It ends up being a game of cat and mouse. The more anxious one is, the more avoidant the other is. If you're hearing all of this thinking, oop, that might be me, or that sounds like my partner. There are, I don't want to say like good qualities because we're not trying to like glamorize unhealthy attachment styles, but like there are like silver linings to having an anxious or an avoidant attachment style, because I don't want you to feel just horrible about yourself until you become secure. With anxious people, you know, they can be really good listeners, be really good caregivers. They're so focused on other people. Avoidant people are highly independent. Yes, sometimes too independent. We talked about that, but they can be self-sufficient and they're usually pretty undemanding in relationships. Now, let's talk about healing because we're all trying to work towards being securely attached. The first step is learning about attachment, watching this video, increasing your awareness. Number 2 is identifying which attachment you are, calling yourself out, and identifying your toxic patterns, your disruptive behaviors. And I'll leave a couple links down below to attachment style quizzes you can take. It'll take 5 minutes and you can go even further into understanding your behaviors. Now it's time to actually catch yourself doing it when you're doing it. Why is this important? Because then while you're in the act of, let's say, worrying, stressing about if your partner's gonna cheat on you, what they're doing, if they're thinking about you, and you can pause in real time and be like, oh, this is me doing that thing. Maybe this is not about my partner potentially being a cheater and more about me just having the need to worry and control. If you're avoidant, you can catch yourself in real time ghosting someone or withdrawing and like confront that mentally, and that's the first step to healing that. Once you can catch yourself in the act, you can start to confront it. And something that's been really helpful for me is to almost play devil's advocate with myself and think, what are the counter thoughts to this? What would a secure girly do? So if I am anxious and am able to catch myself thinking, why is my partner not texting me back fast enough? Do they not like me? Did I do something wrong? Are they mad at me? I can put weight on the other thoughts and really embrace the idea of maybe they're working, maybe they're busy at work. You ever thought about that? Number 4 is journaling about it, reflecting, meditating, or going to therapy. This is so you can validate your natural attachment style, because your natural attachment style doesn't make you a bad person. If you're anxious, you're not just like crazy. If you're avoidant, you're not just cold-hearted. We've developed these styles to protect ourselves. They have come from a place of needing to feel safe. When you journal, you can ask yourself questions like, where does this attachment style come from? What in my childhood might have triggered this? Why do I feel unloved or unvaluable? Why do I feel like everyone's gonna leave me? Or for the avoidant, you can ask yourself, why is it hard for me to get close to people. Where does this come from? When I do get close to someone, what is the cringe? What am I actually feeling? What am I scared of? Another thing you can do is have mantras, and I mean, don't just mean like look at yourself and be like, I'm a secure person, even though you know you're not. That's not what I mean. I mean having mantras like, I deserve secure attachment. I deserve love. Lastly is to set manageable goals and put all of this into practice. So if you're avoidant, you struggle with having a real connection, being vulnerable, opening up and relying on people. So first of all, you can practice by communicating with your partner. This is what I'm not great at. I'm not great at texting people back fast. I'm not great at opening up to people, but I'm working on it. Just so your partner knows where you're at. Or with things like boundaries, you can just be honest, like, hey, when we get into a fight, I just really need space. I really need to take the time to step away, and while yes, my natural instinct is to just totally avoid it, I still need the space, and I'm gonna work on taking the space and thinking about how to come back to you. Also, you can try to just baby steps your way into being more vulnerable and relying on people. You don't have to go trusting anyone with your life or anything important. You can just start with, hey, can you pick me up some food for dinner? Or hey, I'm having a bad day. Can I call you and talk? And if you're anxiously attached, here are some practical things you can do. If you find yourself worried what your partner's thinking, if they're gonna leave you, you know, who they're talking to, you can, also just ask. I know that's hard to ask for that reassurance because that was an unsafe thing to do as a child. You were seen as a burden. But part of being in a healthy adult relationship is asking for what you need. And sometimes, asking to be loved, asking to be reassured. And the third thing that can help an anxiously attached person is to, I know this is so much easier said than done, but truly try slowly letting go of control. Try to let your partner's actions speak louder than your invasive thoughts. So instead of assuming that your partner is gonna cheat on you, like, let their actions speak for themselves. Let them show you that they're a trustworthy person and believe them when they show you. That is all I have for you today. Guys, remember that all of this is like really easy to hear, but not easy to do in practice. So be patient and compassionate with yourself. If this was helpful at all, please like and subscribe. It really helps my channel out, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye guys.